How do you conquer a city built by the gods themselves? A fortress that has stood defiant for 10 long years against the greatest army ever assembled? You don't break down its walls. You convince the enemy to open their gates for you. You don't send more soldiers. You send a gift. This is the story of that gift. A hollow wooden horse that held a silent, deadly secret. Welcome to Sleeping Scribe. Here, we believe that calming history stories can help you relax and unwind. To understand the genius of the horse, we must first go back. We must return to the mind of its creator. The clever king of Ithaca, Odysseus, stood staring at those unconquerable walls. He knew, with absolute certainty, that brute force would never be enough. Something more was needed. The war had dragged on for a decade. A whole generation of soldiers knew nothing but the shoreline of Troy. The Greek forces were exhausted. Their supplies were low, and their spirits were even lower. The city of Troy remained untouched, protected by its legendary defenses. These were not ordinary walls of stone and mortar. They were said to have been built by the gods themselves, by Apollo and Poseidon. For 10 years, this divine construction had held firm against every assault. Every frontal attack had failed. Every siege tower had been burned. Every attempt to scale the walls had been met with fierce resistance. The Trojans were safe within their city, and the Greeks were weary on the plains outside. A profound stalemate had settled over the land. It was a war of attrition, and it seemed Troy could hold out forever. And so, the Greek chieftains gathered in their camp. They were desperate for a new strategy. Among them was Odysseus, the king of the small island of Ithaca. He was not the strongest warrior, nor the mightiest king, but he was known for something far more valuable. He was known for his cunning, his cleverness, his metis. This was a Greek word for a kind of wisdom that combines skill with deception. As others debated strategies of war, Odysseus thought of strategies of mind. He understood a simple truth. If they could not go through the walls or over the walls, then they must be brought down from within. The Trojans themselves would have to open their gates. But how could that be achieved? How do you convince your mortal enemy to welcome their own doom? The idea, when it came, was said to be a whisper from the heavens, a divine inspiration from Athena, the goddess of wisdom and warfare, who favored Odysseus. The plan was not to build another weapon of war. Instead, they would build an offering, a tribute to the gods, so grand and so holy that the Trojans would see it as a sacred prize. And inside this offering, a handful of their best soldiers would wait. This was the seed of the idea, a plan with a dual purpose. It would be a hiding place for soldiers and a convincing religious object. This was the genesis of the Trojan Horse. The idea was strange and deeply risky, but desperation had made the Greeks bold. The plan was presented to the other kings, and with little else to lose, they agreed. They would place their faith not in the strength of their arms, but in the mind of Odysseus. And so, the focus of the great army shifted. The sounds of clashing swords and war cries were replaced by the sounds of construction. The forging of a new and entirely different kind of weapon had begun, an instrument of pure deceit. The man chosen for this immense task was a master carpenter named Epeius. He was known as the best craftsman in the Greek army. The stories say that he too was guided by the goddess Athena. She gave him the skill and the vision to bring the massive structure to life. He gathered his tools and his best workers, and they set out to find the right materials. They did not use just any wood. For the deception to work, Every detail had to be perfect. They chose the wood of the cornel tree, a plant that was sacred to the god Apollo. This choice was deliberate. It would add to the horse's religious appearance. It would make the offering seem more genuine to the Trojan priests who might inspect it. The scale of the horse was immense. It needed to be large enough to inspire awe in the Trojans. They had to see it as a truly grand tribute to the gods. It also needed to be large enough to comfortably hide a group of elite soldiers and their armor. Yet it could not be so impossibly large that it was unbelievable as a handcrafted object. Appius and his men worked tirelessly, shaping the sacred wood into the form of a majestic horse. It stood on great wooden legs, with a flowing mane and a hollow belly, accessed by a hidden door. Upon its side, a message was carefully inscribed. The letters dedicated the horse to the goddess Athena. It was an offering, the inscription claimed, for a safe return home for the Greek army. It was a plea for forgiveness, for all the years of war, and for the desecration of her temples. Every element was designed to sell a single powerful lie, the lie that the Greeks had finally given up. While the horse was being built, Odysseus was selecting the men for the mission. This was not a task for just any soldier. It required incredible bravery, discipline, and patience. Those who went inside the horse would be trapped in total darkness, deep within enemy territory. The slightest sound could betray them and lead to certain death. Odysseus, of course, would lead them. He was joined by some of the greatest remaining Greek heroes. Menelaus, the king of Sparta, whose wife, Helen, was the cause of the war, was among them. So was Neoptolemus, the fierce son of the fallen Achilles. A small elite force, handpicked for the most dangerous mission of the entire war. They were the hidden blade, waiting silently inside the beautiful wooden gift. The horse was now complete. But the most difficult part of the plan was yet to come. They had to convince the Trojans to take it. This final stage of the deception required a performance of breathtaking scale and skill. It began with the entire Greek fleet. After 10 long years, the thousands of Greek ships hoisted their sails. They turned their backs on the shores of Troy and sailed away. To any Trojan scout watching from the walls, it was an unbelievable sight. The enemy was finally leaving. But the fleet was not truly gone. They sailed only as far as the nearby island of Tenedos, just beyond the horizon. There, they dropped anchor and waited, hidden from view. Back on the beach, they left 2 things behind. The enormous wooden horse, standing silent in the morning light, and a single man named Sinon. Sinon was a cousin of Odysseus, and a man chosen for his ability to lie convincingly. His role was perhaps the most dangerous of all. He was to be the storyteller, the one who would deliver the great lie directly to the Trojans. He allowed himself to be captured, and he was dragged before the Trojan king, Priam. There, he began to tell his carefully crafted story. He claimed he had deserted the treacherous Greeks. He wept as he explained that the Greek seer had declared that a human sacrifice was needed for a safe journey home, and that he, Sinon, had been chosen as the victim. He had only just managed to escape in the night. His performance was brilliant. He played on the Trojans' hatred of the Greeks and on their pity. Once he had their sympathy, he began to reveal the secret of the horse. It was, he confirmed, an offering to the goddess Athena. Its purpose was to appease her anger and ensure the Greeks' safe passage home. But then he added the crucial detail, the masterful stroke of psychological genius. King Priam asked him, Why was it built so large? Sinon explained that the Greeks had done this on purpose. They knew that if the Trojans were to take the horse inside their city, the city itself would become blessed by Athena. It would become unconquerable. The Greeks, he claimed, made it too large to fit through the gates of Troy, to prevent them from gaining this divine protection. This single idea changed everything. It transformed the horse from a strange relic into a powerful talisman, a prize to be won, and it sparked a furious debate within the city walls. Not everyone was convinced. Two voices rose above the celebration, urging caution. The first was Laocoon, a priest of Poseidon. He rushed toward the crowd, shouting his famous warning, "I fear the Greeks, even when they bear gifts." He suspected a trick. In his fury and suspicion, he hurled his spear into the side of the horse. The weapon struck the hollow belly with a deep thud, and those nearby could hear the faint, muffled rattling of armor from within. For a moment, the deception teetered on the brink of discovery. But the gods, it seemed, were on the side of the Greeks. Just as Laocoon's warning began to sway the crowd, a horrifying sight emerged from the sea. Two giant sea serpents rose from the waves. They slithered onto the beach and made their way directly for the priest and his two young sons. The creatures coiled around them, and their terrible work was done. To the terrified Trojans, the meaning was clear. This was a divine sign. Laocoon had committed a sacrilege by striking the sacred offering. The gods themselves had punished him for his disbelief. His death silenced all further debate. At the same time, the city's own prophetess, the Princess Cassandra, also cried out that the horse would be their doom. But she was cursed by the gods, and her true prophecies were never to be believed. And so, the debate was settled. The Trojans, now utterly convinced of the horse's divine power, made their fateful decision. Convinced by Sinon's lie, and by the divine sign of the serpents, they began to do what no Greek army could ever accomplish. With joyous shouts and great effort, they tore down a section of their own god-built wall to make way for the gift. The great Trojan horse was rolled into the heart of the city, and the fate of Troy was sealed. The sounds from the outside were muffled and strange. First came the grinding of stone on stone, as the Trojans tore an opening in their own mighty wall. Then a great cheer went up from 1,000 throats. The horse began to move. Inside, in the pitch-black belly of the beast, the Greek soldiers felt a slow, lurching rumble. They were being pulled into the very heart of the city they had failed to conquer for a decade. For Odysseus and his men, a new kind of battle had begun. A battle against their own senses and their own minds. The darkness was absolute. It was a thick, suffocating blackness that pressed in on them. The air was hot and heavy with the smell of pine wood, sweat, and nervous breath. Their muscles ached from being held in cramped, unnatural positions for hours. Every tiny shift in weight threatened to make a sound. From outside, they could hear the sounds of celebration. The joyous shouts of the Trojans echoed through the wooden hull. They heard music, singing, and laughter. These were the sounds of their enemies' relief. The sounds of a people who believed their long nightmare was finally over. For the men inside, these sounds were a special kind of torture. They were a constant reminder of how close they were to both victory and to discovery. Discipline was everything. Odysseus was their anchor in the darkness. He moved silently among them, a reassuring touch on his shoulder, a whispered word of encouragement. One younger soldier, overcome by the heat and the tension, came close to crying out. The story goes that Odysseus himself had to place a hand over the man's mouth, physically holding back the sound that would have doomed them all. Time became meaningless. There was only the darkness, the heat, and the muffled sounds from outside. The rumbling eventually stopped. They could feel that they were stationary, placed in what must have been the city's center. The sounds of celebration continued for hours, surrounding them, taunting them with their proximity. The soldiers could do nothing but wait. They had to wait for the joy to fade. They had to wait for the city to sleep. Outside the horse, the city of Troy was alive with a joy it had not known for 10 years. The war was over. This single thought echoed in the streets, in the homes, and in the temples. It was a feeling of pure, unburdened relief. The Trojans swarmed around the great wooden horse, which now stood like a new god in their central square. They draped it with garlands of fresh flowers. They touched its wooden sides with a sense of awe and reverence. Wine flowed freely from every jug. The people danced in the streets, their steps light with the new promise of peace. Music, once reserved for somber funerals, was now bright and filled with life. The air smelled of celebratory fires, roasting meats, and the sweet incense burning in the temples as thanks to the gods. For one night, Troy was not a fortress. It was a city reborn. Children who had only ever known the threat of the Greek army now ran laughing through the open square. Old men and women who had thought they would die during the endless siege raised their cups to the sky. They toasted to King Priam, they toasted to Troy, and they toasted to the magnificent wooden horse, their new divine protector. As the sun began to set, it cast a warm golden light over the city. The shadows grew long, and the celebrations began to soften. The wild dancing gave way to contented songs around the fires. The city was full and happy and slowly becoming tired. The moon rose high in the sky, looking down upon a city that believed it was finally and completely safe. One by one, the people of Troy, aided by the flowing wine and a decade of exhaustion, drifted off to sleep. The music faded. The fires burned down to embers. Silence began to fall over the city. A deep, heavy, and unsuspecting silence. In the deep cloak of that night, the city slept. The moon cast pale light on the silent streets. From the shadows, a figure emerged. It was Sinon. He had played his part perfectly, and now his final task was at hand. He crept to a high point on the edge of the city, overlooking the sea. There, on the tomb of the hero Achilles, he lit a signal fire. It was a single bright flame in the darkness, a message to the hidden fleet that the time had come. He then made his way back to the giant horse, which stood motionless in the city square. He approached the base of the great structure, and his hands found the cleverly hidden latch. A faint click echoed in the stillness of the night. It was the only sound. Slowly, silently, a trapdoor creaked open in the horse's underbelly. The cool night air rushed into the suffocating space within. A rope ladder was lowered, its soft braids making no sound as they touched the stone ground. The first soldier emerged from the darkness. It was Odysseus. He descended with a practiced silence, his bare feet touching the ground of the enemy city. One by one, his hand-picked warriors followed him. They were ghosts emerging from a wooden shell. Men who had been entombed for hours now stood breathing the free, cool air of the night. Their first task was to deal with the few sentries who were posted near the horse. These guards were drunk and drowsy from the celebration. They were dispatched with silent blades, their watch ending before they even knew it had been threatened. The Greek warriors were now loose inside Troy. Their primary objective was clear. They did not spread out to fight. They moved as one single silent unit through the sleeping streets. Their destination was the main gate of the city, the great Scion gate, which the Trojans themselves had partially dismantled to bring the horse inside. The small band of heroes reached the massive gates. The guards here were also sleepy and unprepared. After a brief, quiet struggle, the gatehouse was theirs. The heavy bronze bars were lifted. The massive wooden doors, which had held back an army for a decade, began to groan open. They opened not to a Trojan patrol, but to the entire Greek army, which had sailed back from the island of Tenedos under the cover of darkness. The soldiers poured into the city like a silent rising tide. The fall of Troy did not begin with a great battle cry. It began with whispers. It began as a slow, creeping tide of doom that flowed through the darkened streets. A family, sleeping peacefully, might first awaken to the distant smell of smoke. A single cry in the night, quickly silenced, might be heard from down an alley. A person peering from their window might see the glint of unfamiliar armor in the torchlight, where none should be. The Greek army did not announce its presence. They moved with deadly purpose. They set fires to key buildings, not just to destroy, but to create chaos and confusion. The Trojans, waking from their deep, wine-aided sleep, were disoriented and terrified. They stumbled from their homes, not to an organized defense, but to a nightmare already in progress. The enemy they thought was gone was now inside their homes. The city awakened to a dawning horror. There was no single battlefront. The fighting was everywhere. In the streets, in the squares, and in the houses. The dream of peace had lasted for only a few short hours. Now, the reality of the war had come home, past their walls and into their very beds. The great city of Troy, which had stood unconquerable for so long, was now breathing its last. The palace of King Priam, standing on its high hill, became the final point of a hopeless resistance, as the city around it fell to whispers and to flames. And what of the horse itself? What became of this silent, wooden vessel that carried doom within it? History does not give us a single clear answer. Its purpose was fulfilled. Its great deception was complete. Most accounts from ancient writers suggest that it was destroyed in the very fires that consumed the city it had conquered. Perhaps it was burned by the victorious Greeks, a final, great offering to the gods who had granted them their victory, a cleansing of the instrument of their deceit. Or perhaps, in the days that followed, the few Trojan survivors set it ablaze themselves, an act of defiance or an attempt to erase the symbol of their own tragic mistake. Its physical form, the sacred cornel wood and masterful carpentry, likely turned to ash and smoke, mingling with the ruins of Troy. The physical horse may have vanished, but its story was just beginning. The idea of the horse proved to be far more durable than the wood it was made from. The tale was told and retold, around campfires and in the courts of kings. It was eventually written down, preserved forever in the epic poems that formed the bedrock of Western literature. While many know the story from Homer's Iliad, the most detailed account of the horse itself comes from the Roman poet Virgil in his masterpiece, the Aeneid. In this epic, a Trojan survivor named Aeneas tells the story of his city's fall, ensuring that the legend of the horse would echo through the ages. It became more than just a story. It became a lesson, a cautionary tale about pride and about the danger of accepting gifts from your enemies. And so, the echo of that wooden horse still resonates today. The phrase Trojan horse has detached completely from its ancient origins. It has become a timeless metaphor. It describes any deception that works by being willingly brought past a person's own defenses. In the modern world, we speak of Trojan horse viruses in our computers. These are malicious programs that we invite in, disguised as something useful or harmless. The name of this ancient trick has found a permanent home in our language. It is a quiet reminder that the most effective attacks are often not those of brute force. They are the ones that exploit our own trust and our own desires. The legend of the Trojan horse is not truly a story about a great battle. It is a story about human nature. It is a testament to the power of a single clever idea. It reminds us that sometimes the greatest victories are not won with the clash of swords, but with the quietest and most patient of whispers. The greatest legends are often born from the most unexpected of places. not in the light of day, but waiting silently in the patient darkness.